Amateur Traveler is in its 20th year now, but can you imagine if I had people on the show who had never been to the destination, but had just read about it or seen a movie about it? That wouldn't make any sense at all, and you wouldn't listen. We all know how important it is to receive advice from people who know a destination to get the most authentic local experience. And a great option for experiencing this is Explore Worldwide and their authentic small group adventures, led by local tour leaders, perfect for solo travelers who want to meet like minded people with a desire for adventure. I'm often an independent traveler, but two of my last three trips were with small group tours because they organize everything and it's a lot easier. If you want to recreate the tour I did to Malta, they have a Malta and Gozo Discovery Tour. I'm intrigued by one of their tours called A Taste of Sicily. The company again is Explore Worldwide, and visit exploreworldwide.com to learn more. And thanks to Explore Worldwide for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler. The nights are long, the days are short, and the weather is chilly to downright cold, depending on where you are. It's a good time to slip into a Quince iconic Mongolian cashmere sweaters, which start at only $50. You can treat yourself to everyday luxury at an affordable price with Quince. If you really want to dive into luxury, you can check out their leather handbags, washable silk shirts, and European linen sheet sets. Whatever you're looking for at Quince, all the prices are 50 to 80% less than similar brands, and they do that by partnering directly with top factories and cutting out the middleman. They only work with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing processes. And of course, they use premium fabrics and finishes for that luxury feel in every piece. But you've already heard me rave about my Quince travel pants. Treat yourself this winter without the luxury price tag. Go to quince.com/traveler for 365-day returns plus free shipping on your order. That's QUINCE.com/traveler to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/traveler. And thanks to Quince for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler.
Got my bags packed, I'm on a roll. I'm heading out there and I'm ready to go. I'm looking real good in my passport photo.
Amateur Traveler, episode 644. Today, the Amateur Traveler talks about the oldest ski area in the U.S., Lewis and Clark Sacagawea, wine, craters of the moon, and potatoes as we go to Idaho. Welcome to the Amateur Traveler. I'm your host, Chris Christensen. Let's talk about Idaho. I'd like to welcome to the show Jaime Mazur from JamieSays.com. And Jaime has come to talk to us about Idaho. Jaime, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Chris.
I met Jaime a couple of years ago on a fam trip, on a press trip, although she had a different last name at the time, which is relevant to talking about Idaho because you went to Idaho on your honeymoon.
My husband and I decided after we got married that we were going to go on a honeymoon over the summer, and he had watched a movie and it was about Idaho. It's on Amazon Prime. It's called Idaho the Movie. And he said, we have to go to Idaho for our honeymoon. And I said, do you mean Italy? Because I think you mean Italy. And he said, no, you just need to watch this. I really think you're going to want to go to Idaho too. So I watched it when he was not home. So I had no outside influences, just the show. And I was convinced. So we went to Idaho for 12 days over our honeymoon in July.
And convinced to the extent that part of your long-term plan now includes moving to Idaho, I understand.
Hopefully, yes.
Hopefully. We'll see about that.
Not sure. Yeah.
Well, and why should someone visit Idaho? Let's start with that. We'll leave out the move to Idaho and let them worry about that later on. Why should someone visit Idaho?
Idaho has the complexity of the entire U.S. terrain in just one state. In the Panhandle, it's land dominated by forests and lakes, and it's humid year-round, and it's also in the Pacific Standard Time Zone, just the little Panhandle. Then south of the Panhandle is the Palouse, which is French for the lawn. It's breathtakingly green and lush rolling hills right on the Washington border. If you continue further down south, you're in Gold Rush country and America's Moscow, which it's spelled Moscow.
Moscow, yeah, Idaho.
Yep. And then it's the high desert climate of one of the fastest growing cities in the US, which is Boise, Idaho, which is pronounced Boise, not Boise.
Oh.
That's something locals will tell you. Nearby to the east of Boise is the billionaire's playground of Sun Valley. And past that, it's the arid lava fields of the Craters of the Moon National Monument. If you follow that up north, you'll be in the Frank Church Wilderness, which is 2.4 million acres of land with no roads, and it's the largest swath of land in the lower 48 without any roads. So all of that in just one state.
Excellent. Well, and I'm thinking you just laid out an itinerary, or at least part of one, so I won't ask you that question. Let's get going then. Where are you going to start us?
Okay, so I'm actually starting us in Washington. We're going to Spokane.
Okay.
Spokane is the nearest major airport to northern Idaho.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're going to start in Idaho, I'm going to start us up north, and then we're going to go kind of clockwise and end in Boise. Spokane is 45 miles from Coeur d'Alene, which is a popular resort town in northern Idaho, and you've heard of it. Is that correct?
I have heard of it. And we're going to have a little trouble spelling it and pronouncing it because like Moscow, things are not always pronounced the way they are in other parts of the world here. So you're going to Coeur d'Alene.
Coeur d'Alene. So why you would want to start there, and I guess this is also because it was our honeymoon. Coeur d'Alene is the only 4-star resort in Idaho. So if you're looking for something particularly fancy, Coeur d'Alene in northern Idaho is the only AAA 4-star resort in northern Idaho. It's very popular. It's got a beautiful lake. It's greenery. There's lots of hiking. On the 4th of July, they have a beautiful fireworks show over the water. So Coeur d'Alene is only 45 minutes from Spokane and easy to get to as your first destination in Idaho. Now, if you are looking for some place that is less crowded, at 4th of July, Coeur d'Alene was very crowded. I read that the Kardashians were there and Kanye was there. So I think it's really caught on. But if you don't mind driving a little bit further away, just 80 miles from Spokane is Sandpoint, Idaho, where my husband and I spent 3 days. It is in the mountains, and we stayed at Schweitzer Mountain Resort. It's a ski lodge in the winter and actually the largest ski area in Idaho and Washington. But in the summer, it's known for Lake Pend Oreille. So Lake Pend Oreille is the deepest lake in Idaho, and it's actually deeper than 4 of the 5 Great Lakes.
Oh, wow. Because it's not nearly the size.
No. And there is a story we were told by locals that Eleanor Roosevelt was in a plane flying over the United States. She looked down, she saw Lake Pend Oreille and said, "Ooh, that looks nice. Let's look into that." And somehow a military practice started happening in Lake Pend Oreille, and they started practicing the efficacy of the submarines. So it's where the U.S. military will test submarines in Lake Pend Oreille because it's so deep that's where they test the submarines.
And I suppose it's a lot easier to keep foreign spies from seeing it in Idaho than it would be in one of the oceans.
Yes,
that
yes, I
surprises
think
me.
so.
And you mentioned when you drove from Coeur d'Alene up to Sand Point that you drove 80 miles, and we should say you drove north and you drove literally halfway to the Canadian border. You're only probably 80 to 100 miles from the Canadian border at this point.
Right. So it's actually 80 miles from Spokane.
From Spokane. Okay, so even closer then.
So
Okay.
I believe it's about 30 miles
Okay.
from Coeur d'Alene. But yes, it is so close to Canada that from the top of Schweitzer Mountain Resort in
Hmm.
Sandpoint, you can see the view of three states, so Washington, Idaho, Montana, and Canada, because it
Hmm.
is very close. So when you're in Sandpoint, you can either spend your time, I think it's best to spend some time at the top of the Schweitzer Mountain Resort, high on the mountain, and then also spend some time in Lake Pend Oreille.
And you say in Lake Pend Oreille, I'm gathering Lake Pend Oreille is going to be pretty darn cold if it's that deep.
So cold. My husband refused to go in, but
I'm with him.
I did jump in. I was rather pesky and I said, I really want to jump in this water. It's so hot. We were there in July
Hmm.
and I jumped in and it was like a thousand knives because it was so cold. I immediately regretted it. And I came up. My husband said the look on my face was just one of, oh my gosh, get me out of here right now. So I went in once and I will not go back in. But it is nice to rent a boat and spend
Hmm.
some time on the water. But there is one local outfitter where you can rent boats, and they are called Sandpoint Boat and RV Rental. And you can rent boats in 2 to 5 hour increments.
Okay.
It's pretty affordable. We rented a boat for just the two of us over 4th of July weekend, and we were able to do that just a week in advance. So it didn't get too booked up even on a holiday weekend.
Hmm.
So that's fun to rent a boat, check out the Green Monarchs, which is a beautiful mountain range on the lake. You can also stop in the various little ports and get lunch. We did not stop on any ports because we only had the boat for a couple of hours, but it's a nice way to spend a day on the lake.
Hmm.
After you get off the lake, you'll be in right in downtown Sandpoint and probably going to want to get something to eat or something to drink. They have a really good ice cream shop called Sandpoint Cone and Coffee, and it has some very interesting ice cream flavors. There's also multiple breweries in the area. We like the Idaho Pour Authority, and yeah, it's got a cute name. There's also the Pend Oreille Winery.
Hmm.
My husband's more into beer, so we went to the Pour Authority, and then we went to the Pend Oreille Winery. It's just a little shop in downtown Sandpoint, and we really enjoyed it. The food was great. We stopped at a place called the Fat Pig, which we were told by locals to try. So some places to eat are the Fat Pig, Beet and Basil, and Baxter's on Cedar. Those were some of the places that people recommended to us. So that's Sandpoint. Are you ready to go explore more of Idaho?
I am ready.
Okay, so the most beautiful drive I've ever experienced is the drive between Sandpoint, Idaho, and Salmon, Idaho.
Okay.
Oh, no, you haven't, right? You haven't taken this drive.
I have not taken this drive. Of the places you've named so far, I've been to Moscow.
Oh, oh,
I've watched a minor league baseball game in Moscow, Idaho, or maybe it was a high school game. I don't even remember. It's a long time ago.
it is minor league because one of my friends from grade school, her husband plays for the minor league team in Moscow.
Okay.
Moscow. Cool. Okay, so the most beautiful drive is between Sandpoint and Salmon. It's about a 6 hour drive, so you can break it up into 3.5 hours between Sandpoint and Missoula, Montana,
Hmm.
and 2.5 hours from Missoula to Salmon. That's only if you don't want to spend 6 hours driving in the car. It's up to you. But this drive is called the Idaho Scenic Byway.
Now, most of this Idaho Scenic Byway is in Montana.
Much of it is, yes.
Okay.
But when you loop back over it, you'll cross the Continental Divide. And
Okay.
along the way, there are a lot of switchbacks. So you do need to be careful.
Hmm.
It's slow driving, but just beautiful. You've got the Clark Fork River on one side, and then these incredible mountains on the other side. And you'll see frequently that there are little placards and pull offs on the road because while you're driving this, it's the same route that has many of the places that of the Lewis and Clark expedition.
Okay.
So it was Captain William Clark who took this part of the trail. So most of the signs will talk about his trek into Idaho. If you decide to stop in Missoula, you can stop at Big Sky Brewing. You could see the
Okay.
campus of the Missoula University of Montana. But if you don't stop in Missoula, just head straight towards Salmon. And when you're in Salmon, I recommend staying in Salmon for at least 3 days. And those are 3 days that can either be spent at the most wonderful bed and breakfast called the Syringa Lodge. And syringa is a type of flower that's common in Idaho. Or if you don't want to stay the whole time on the lodge, then you should definitely stay or take an outfitter to stay and camp along the Salmon River and go down the Salmon River. So the two outfitters that I would recommend, or for overnights, I would recommend Idaho Adventures. They'll arrange 1 to 6 day stays on the Salmon River. You can whitewater raft, you can fish, you can canoe. They'll tailor it to whatever you would like to do. Otherwise, if you are staying in Salmon at Syringa, then definitely do the day trips with Rawhide Outfitter. So most people will go to fish or to fly fish, but there's also really great rafting. The Salmon River was referred to as the River of No Return.
I was wondering if you were going to bring that up. Yes, we're encouraging people to go on the River of No Return.
So I actually did not tell my husband that we were going to be rafting.
Okay.
So the reason why is that when Captain Clark was on his way west, he thought that his band of, I guess, his troop, and I'm sure you know this, Chris, but in case other readers or listeners don't know, that they thought that once they crossed the Continental Divide, they'd just find a river to take them right out to the ocean. But instead, they crossed the Continental Divide and they found the Salmon River, which he described as almost one continued rapid, that the water runs with great violence, that it's foaming and roaring through rocks in every direction. So it was at this point that he realized that they could not take their little canoes down this crazy rapid river. And so they actually had to turn back and go north up through Lolo Pass north of Salmon.
Konnichiwa, I'm Yuki, a tour leader with Explore. Who knew that hidden among Tokyo's towering skyscrapers was a peaceful tea house surrounded by ancient trees and serene ponds? Actually, I knew. It was my mother's secret sanctuary. Not everyone knows about Tokyo's Hamarikyu Gardens. Arigatou gozaimasu. But you will if you explore. Search exploreworldwide.com and don't just travel, explore.
So, of course, I would not tell my husband that we were taking this almost one continued rapid ride, but it's actually, we went with Rawhide Outfitters, and it was really not that bad. There were children, I think, as young as 7 or 8 on our expedition.
And this is a one-day trip? This is a day trip?
So this is a single day trip. Leave in the morning. You go to a gold mine, an actual gold mine that's still owned by a 97-year-old man who takes photos for them of you in the rapids, which is really fun. And he has his little gold mine panning station set up because it used to be a working gold mine, but now he just takes photos for outfitters. So we saw 8-year-olds, and they said that there were over 70-year-olds on this trip. So everyone of various ages, it's really not that difficult to handle these rapids. There are 8 to 10 people in one raft, and really the bulk of the work is taken on by whoever is from the Rawhide Outfitters who's controlling the oars.
So it was an oar boat, not a paddle boat.
Yes, it was an
Okay.
oar.
And the difference between the two is in an oar boat, you're powered by the river, but you're guided by the guide who has two great big oars. In a paddle boat, it's everybody on the left paddle sort of thing. So a very different experience. I happen to like both. I think it's fun when you're taking part. And you mentioned this being a day trip, and there are longer trips available. One outfitter I would recommend for this, because of good experiences with them, is Oars. They do expeditions on a number of the wild rivers in the U.S. Had a really great trip with them down the Green River in Colorado, the shorter trip. That was a 3-day trip. This is a 6-day trip for them. And so then you're going to get into some more rugged rapids, I think, than you do on the day trip. So I don't know what the age limit is for that, but you could look into them.
That sounds great. And if you do end up not being able to have an overnight on the river, just the single day trips are incredible.
Well, and when you do the longer one, you're actually in the second deepest gorge in North America.
Oh.
That's one of the reasons why you do these longer things is you can't really get out. You can get out of the one day, and then and sometimes you have to go further down the river until there's a place to get out. And so obviously you do it because it's fun too. You mentioned Lewis and Clark, and if you look at their plan of we'll just find a river and take it to the Pacific, it makes a lot more sense if you think about the fact that they got so close to that area by just following the Missouri River, the longest river in the U.S., and they followed it all the way up to Montana, basically, and I think it goes through Helena, as I recall. So you're really not that far. You're fairly close to Missoula. In fact, I think the river in Missoula runs into that river as well. You may remember Missoula from the movie A River Runs Through It, and they know that a river runs through Missoula.
Yes.
So it was fairly easy for them via water, although circuitous, to get this far. But yeah, then once they got on the salmon, it was a little more than they bargained for.
Yeah. And speaking also of Lewis and Clark, salmon is also the birthplace of Sacagawea.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So in Salmon, there is a Sacagawea museum. So once you're off the river, since my recommendation is to spend a few days in Salmon, you can go see the museum. You can also golf. There's a great public golf course in Salmon. It's 9 holes, not too expensive, not too hard. I'm not a particularly skilled golfer. It was something fun to do while we were in the area, very relaxing. And then also while you're in Salmon, I have to recommend going to Bertram's Brewery. It is a microbrewery and restaurant in Salmon. But the reason I'm recommending it is for their huckleberry ice cream.
Oh.
Have you had any huckleberry ice cream?
No, but I am game.
Okay, good. It is delicious. We went there 2 days. They have great waffle cones. My husband liked the beer. I was just there for the ice cream. So Salmon has good food, Bertram's, or you can go to Junkyard Bistro. That was another great place that we ate when we were in Salmon, because all that rafting, we worked up an appetite. We also hiked there. But Salmon is great. Do you have any other questions about Salmon, Chris?
I don't. Just a comment for our listeners who are either not big followers of history or just not from the U.S. I'll put a link to Sacagawea in the show notes because I'm not going to try and spell it for you. But we're talking about someone who was a Native American interpreter, and she was from this area, as you said, but she was basically kidnapped, as I recall, and sold to a trapper. And then she was hired on to the Lewis and Clark expedition as a Shoshone interpreter. I didn't realize she was born this far west.
Yep.
So a fascinating person in terms of what she managed to do. I don't really think the expedition would have been a success without her help.
I totally agree. I think that's something that they make pretty clear, not only in the Sacagawea Museum, but throughout Salmon on the placards while you're driving. They make very clear that Sacagawea was incredibly important in the success of getting Lewis and Clark further west.
Excellent. Where from Salmon do we go?
So after Salmon, we are going to the first ski resort in America. Do you know what that is?
I do. We have a episode of Amateur Traveler. The only
Yes,
other
we
one
do.
on Idaho is on Sun Valley.
I am telling you to go to Sun Valley, but to be honest, when we were on our honeymoon, we booked our trip at the exact same time as the yearly Allen Investment and Company Conference. Now, I am from Chicago. I had
Mhm.
no idea what this was. I called, you're laughing as because I think that means you know what this is.
I've heard of it.
Okay. So I called in March. I was so excited. I thought we were planning in advance for our honeymoon. I just wanted to go there for 2 days because Sun Valley has the only year-round ice skating rink outside. And my husband grew up playing hockey. I love to ice skate. We were really excited to do this. And they said, "Oh no, I'm sorry. The entire resort is booked that week." And I said, who's got this resort? Who can afford this? And I guess it's Allen and Company is an investment bank. They have what is called the Billionaires Media Mogul Conference. So Oprah, Mark Zuckerberg, anyone flies their private jet in and they rent this investment bank rents out the whole resort and they have a little conference. So
Oddly enough, I have not gotten an invitation so far.
yeah, so if you go to Sun Valley, it is only about 3 hours, 3.5 hours from Salmon, and you could have a wonderful time there, but just make sure it's not in the middle of July because you won't be allowed anywhere on the premises.
Hmm.
So you could go to Sun Valley. And what episode was that, Chris, if people want to learn more about Sun Valley?
That was episode 327.
Okay, so you could learn more about Sun Valley in episode 327. If you do happen to be visiting Idaho in July and you don't have the opportunity to go to Sun Valley, you could drive instead because we're making our way to Boise here. So you could go to Sun Valley, or if it's closed, you can drive into Stanley, Idaho, and stop at the Redfish Lake for a gorgeous view of the Sawtooth Mountain. You can hike there. That's another place where you can spend a day hiking, or if you're big with overnight hiking, bring your camping supplies and you can camp and find some really gorgeous glacial lakes up there.
Now, you say hiking in the Sawtooth Mountains. One would guess from the name that the shape of the mountains is sawtooth and therefore fairly
Difficult.
jagged, fairly difficult. Yes. Are we hiking around the mountains or are we hiking up the mountains?
So you can hike up the mountains if you have multiple days. If you don't, you can just hike around Redfish Lake.
Okay.
So it's really up to you. If you prioritize hiking, this would be a great place to do it. The lake is relatively, in July, it's relatively crowded. It's a nice place to stop. But again, I think this might have been particularly crowded when we were there because Sun Valley was closed. I'm not 100% sure, but it is a nice place to stop. I had one friend growing up who was from Idaho. He was from Boise, and this was his favorite place to hike. So he recommended it. Even though my husband and I did not hike it, it is supposed to be very rewarding for people who can overnight hike there.
Okay.
And now last, we're rounding out our trip to Idaho with time in Boise, which is one of the fastest growing cities in the United States. So I must say I was really surprised by Boise. I'm from Chicago, but boy, I just thought it was the greatest city that I had visited in a long time. It's the capital, so the Capitol building is similar to any other state capitol, very beautiful, traditionally or classical, I guess, architecture, a dome. So the Capitol was great. We also spent some time getting to know the city on bikes. It's a very bike-friendly city. They have a 30-mile loop around Boise. It's called the Green Belt. So the hotel where My husband and I stayed, it was the Inn at 500 Capital. As part of your stay, they have bicycles to use along with helmets and baskets. So that was really nice. Otherwise, there are other outfitters in Boise where you can rent a bike. I don't know the name of any offhand just because we had use of the hotel's bicycles. So, of course, my husband, the first thing we had to do was we had to go see the Blue.
I do not know what the Blue is.
Okay, the Blue is the Boise State football field, which is also known as Albertson Stadium. If you look at an image, Boise State's football field is not a green AstroTurf. It is the Boise State Blue. And it was the first of its kind the first college of its kind to have an alternatively colored football field. It's open to the public. You can't step out onto the field, but they have a little viewing deck within the Boise State Athletics Hall of Fame area. So you can go in and see it up close. And it's pretty cool. I don't know if there are other schools with different color fields.
I can't say. I'm not a big college football fan. I liked the reference that I see to it called Smurf Turf.
They did not tell us that's its nickname when we visited, but that is very fitting. Yeah, so we had a great time. We rode our bikes there. And then we also spent some time on the Idaho Wine Trail, the urban Idaho Wine Trail. So Boise and Idaho have a American viticultural area about an hour west, which is called the Snake River Valley. And the soil conditions and growing conditions are very similar to Napa Valley. It's a higher heat and a shorter season. So they do grow similar wines to Napa Valley. And so some of the wineries have little outposts in downtown Boise, which is called the Boise Urban Wine Trail. And when you're on your bike on the green belt, you can stop to a couple different wineries. Some of the places that you can stop, there's Talaya Wine Company, there's Cinder, Coil, and Split Rail. Those were some of the places that I visited. We were, again, on bikes, so we were responsible. Some of the places we didn't have wine tastings at, we just went in and took a peek because it was about 100 degrees when we were there. Yeah. So this is high desert in Boise compared to the northern panhandle, which was pretty humid. It was high desert in Boise. So yeah, it was a fun time, but it was hot. Prepare in advance if you're going in July.
And one thing I learned from a website called jamiesays.com is that there are 4 different wine regions in Idaho.
Yeah.
And this is one of the 4.
Correct. So there's one, the appropriately named Lewis Clark Valley is one. There's an Eagle Foothills, the Snake River Valley. And there's one other that is slipping my mind, but I do know there are 52 wineries in total in Idaho. So it's having a boom right now. And if you do end up visiting Idaho, if you happen to fly Alaska Airlines, they have a special.
Yes.
and this has been going on, I think, all of 2018. And
it's been going on for longer than that, according to a friend who is a flight attendant for Alaska. I just learned about it in 2018. You're talking about the wine flies free
Idaho
policy.
wines fly free. So if you do have any wine that you purchase in Idaho, you can check a bag with your wine and it flies free.
Well, and that is not limited to Idaho. That is a policy. No, you can, if you Google wine flies free Alaska Airlines, you can find all of the different regions where wine flies free. It's from 29 different West Coast cities. So it does include all of the wine regions in California as well. As well as some regions in Washington that also are wine regions.
That is so cool. Alaska is a great airline to fly if you like to purchase wine on your vacations. Speaking of wine, so I mentioned the Snake River Valley, and that's a great day trip outside of Boise. It's about an hour west of Boise in a town called Caldwell, Idaho.
Hmm.
And when you're there, you can either go on a tour, there's Idaho wine tours, or you can hire a car from Boise, which I recommend Idaho Town Car. If that's the case, they're affordable relative to what you might be used to if you have spent time in Napa.
When you're hiring a town car here, you're planning on drinking more wine and doing less driving.
Yes.
It comes with a driver. So, yeah.
Yes, it comes with a driver. And in Idaho, what they say about their wines is a bottle of wine in Idaho that's $30 would be $40 in Oregon and $50 in California. So it's really, as I mentioned, they have similar climate, soil to California. They really do have interesting wines that they're making. And it's because
Similar terroir, if we will.
Ooh, 10 points. That was some good wine words.
I live in California. You pick it up.
Yeah, definitely worth trying because you won't break the bank. I did read on the skim.com, which is almost like a headline news type thing for millennials. It's a millennial daily mailer of headlines. Okay. Over Christmas, they did some sort of advent calendar regarding wine. And according to the skim.com, Idaho purchases the most wine of any state in the union. I can't imagine that's by quantity. I would think it's percentage of people who purchase wine, but that's from the skim.com. So Idaho, they're getting big in the wine scene up in.
That surprises me because Idaho has one of the largest percentages of population who are Latter-day Saints or Mormons who are not allowed to drink wine. So I would have bet against Idaho and Utah in terms of most wine consumption.
I question it as well, but then I saw that the Idaho Wine Commission reposted it. So I don't know,
somebody's cheating, I think.
Well, if you're done drinking your wine in Boise, there's one other place that I must recommend for you to go. Even if you're not a fan of the theater or you don't think you're a fan of the theater, in the summer, there's the Idaho Shakespeare Festival.
Oh, okay.
It is an outdoor Shakespeare-style theater. So it's a repertory theater, which means that they will run
multiple plays simultaneously.
Correct.
Yep.
And some actors are in two different plays at once. One may in a like extra character and a main in the other play. The Idaho Shakespeare Festival is in Boise. It sells out very quickly. So again, I am a bit of a planner. For single day shows, tickets go on sale April 1st. That was at least for 2018. I'm assuming that they run a similar schedule each year. So if you are going to be visiting Boise and want to go see a show, tickets will become available April 1st. You can see what shows they'll have in the upcoming year in advance, but you won't be actually able to purchase tickets for an individual show until April. A lot of the shows sell out to season ticket holders because it is a popular event for downtown Boise. You can bring your own food, bring your own drinks, have a little picnic. There are grass seats where you would bring a blanket to sit in the grass near the stage. Then there are regular seats. There are full tables where you can have seats and eat your meal. And then there are some more grass seats that are behind the general seating. We were comfortable eating just at regular seats without a table. We had just little to-go boxes. We brought food from someplace not within the theater, just in a to-go box, and it was really easy. We had a cooler that we had bought back in Sandpoint.
Okay. Yeah, because you're doing this long road trip here. That makes sense.
Yeah, it was actually a collapsible, lined cooler. So we have that at home now. So the Shakespeare Festival, it's not just Shakespeare shows. It's just in that style. we ended up seeing Misery, which was just basically 95% of the show is just two characters. It's that Stephen King show. And then there was one character who was the police officer, but it was spellbinding. It was an excellent show. And if you do like theater, I highly recommend going to the Shakespeare Festival.
I should clarify one thing when I say that a repertory company is doing multiple plays at the same time. In this case, I think they have one stage, and so that it means that if you go for a week, you may be able to see multiple plays because there's one play one night and a different play the next night. Not all of the 5 plays that they are doing this year overlap, but if you're there for a couple nights, you can probably see a couple plays.
Yeah.
And this year, in 2019, 2 of the 5 plays are Shakespeare. So, as you say, yes, it's not all Shakespeare.
Cool. And they have musicals and such, but...
Yeah, The Music Man is in 2019, for instance. Mm-hmm.
Oh, I like that one.
Well, you may have to go back.
I would gladly do so. So that is my roughly 7 to 10 day tour of Idaho.
Excellent. And then did you fly out of Boise then?
Yep. So we flew out of Boise.
An open jaw itinerary, meaning you flew into one city and out of another one, which is always a good option that you don't have to close that loop necessarily, because it would have been a fair amount of driving to get back to Spokane to fly back from there.
Yeah.
Excellent.
So if you are in Boise, you're going to want to eat something. And it's a little bit of a chain, but the Boise Fry Company, their slogan is fries with a burger on the side.
Okay.
So you go there and there are 8 different types of potatoes to choose from. And they'll tell you a russet potato, a red potato, purple potatoes. And they'll tell you what are the characteristics of each potato if you want something a little sweeter, nuttier.
Okay.
If it fries up crunchier or if it's a little softer. So that you get to pick you get a giant thing of French fries. It's like a basket. It's unbelievable. And then there are 10 different dipping sauces and various different spices and salts that you can dress your fries up with. And then they give you a little burger on the side. And it's really fun. It is the potato state. I haven't mentioned that yet, but yep,
and
Idaho.
This would probably be a good time to mention it, yes.
The license plates in Idaho say Idaho famous potatoes. So definitely try any French fries while you're in Boise. And I particularly recommend Boise Fry Company. I also recommend there is one Michelin-starred restaurant, at least in July there was, called State and Limp. And that's actually an intersection and also the name of the restaurant. Okay. It is something that you would have to book about 3 months in advance. They have 2 seatings a day.
Okay.
Well, it was our honeymoon, so that didn't
seem
crazy. So compared to other major city Michelin-starred restaurants, it's a 5-course set menu with an optional wine pairing. It is more affordable than a larger city like San Francisco or Chicago. Mm-hmm. It's a nice treat if you are looking for some fine dining within Boise. If that's not so much your speed, one of the other eclectic aspects of Boise is that it has the most thriving Basque population of any city in the United States. So it's not the largest Basque population. I initially thought that when they told me it was the most thriving, that it was the largest. That's not true. It's just the most active Basque population.
Okay.
So for people who don't know what the Basque region is, it is I guess semi-autonomous, although not anymore. They're more integrated region of northern Spain and southwestern France that speaks a completely different language than Spanish or French. And it doesn't resemble any of the Romance languages. It's most similar to Nordic.
One of the oldest languages in Europe, we believe.
Correct. Mm-hmm. So,
and the people have been there they were there when the Romans came. So
yeah,
been there for a long time.
They've got a lot of history, and they are very much thriving in downtown Boise. So there's a whole street that is the Basque Street,
Hmm.
and you can get really delicious Basque food. One particular place where we went is called Chikateo, and it was a Thursday night. They had live Basque music, and how you spell this is completely different than what you might think. I was Googling it because someone told me Chikateo at one of the on the urban wine trails. They said, "Oh, you should go to Chikateo." So let me help you. It is, what letter do you think it starts with, Chris?
Well, I'm going to be silly here and guess that it would start with a C.
That's what I thought, but it actually starts with a TXI. So in
Okay.
Boise, Chikateo, it's spelled TXIKITEO. So Chikateo.
Got it.
That's one of the Basque restaurants that we recommend. It's not on the Basque Street. It's a little bit further away, but they had live Basque music with a Spanish guitar and an accordionist. And it was really a fun place. And it was really thriving on the night that we went.
Excellent. We're going to start to wrap this up, I think, with some of our wrap-up questions here. What surprised you about Idaho, other than the fact that your husband talked you into going instead of Italy?
I was most surprised that every time we told people we were on our honeymoon, native Idahoans were surprised. They didn't expect that people would come to Idaho for their honeymoon. It's almost as if they're unaware of how special a place they have.
Excellent. One thing that makes you laugh and say only in Idaho.
Only in Idaho could you drive 1,000 miles without any traffic.
I think that's true in a lot of places in the West here. You got to get out this way more often. So
Oh, gosh. I must.
you're standing in the prettiest spot in Idaho. Where are you standing and what are you looking at?
The prettiest spot in Idaho, I've got two, but I must tell you, Idaho, they don't want everyone to know where some of the most pretty spots are because they like to keep things a little secret. So for the public, I'll say the prettiest spot is on the top of Schweitzer Mountain from
Okay.
the Sky Lodge, and you're looking at the Selkirk Mountains and Lake Pend Oreille.
Okay. And I had to look this up. Schweitzer Mountain, not named after Albert Schweitzer or anything like that, but it's the German word for a Swiss person. And it
Oh,
was named after a Swiss hermit who apparently liked the view up there. So, so there you go. Somebody else agreed with you. All right. And if I asked you to describe Idaho in just 3 words, what 3 words would you use?
our little secret.
Okay. Why our little secret?
Because when we were in Idaho, everywhere we went, and I sort of alluded to this when I said that there was one place that I thought was the most beautiful, but one place that I was willing to share publicly. Everywhere we went, people from Idaho said, "Please don't tell anyone how nice it is here. Please don't tell anyone. We like it quiet here." So, our little secret.
Excellent. Excellent. And our guest again has been Jaime Mazur from jamiesays.com. And we didn't talk about it at the beginning, but the tagline on your blog is purposely quiet travel.
Yes. So when I started dating my now husband, he didn't like to travel because he gets some travel anxiety. Chris, I think you and I actually talked about this a bit when I first met you.
Mhm.
You had mentioned that you had polled your readers what was the place that they were most anxious to travel to, and it was
and I was surprised.
yeah, it was. I was so surprised. It was Australia, I believe you said,
Mhm.
because of such a long flight.
Yeah, exactly.
My husband doesn't like the crowds, doesn't like all of the uncertainty and being in transit very much. So, kind of the best way for us to figure out how he liked to travel was kind of to go to places that are not the most touristed spots of a city or of a country, that are a little bit off the beaten path, that are not too difficult to get to.
Okay.
but are something that is much more manageable than, say, New York City or Tokyo. Blog focuses more on suburbs of major cities or areas of a city, second-tier destinations within a major city, or some of these. I guess you said that the West has multiple places where I could drive 1,000 miles without traffic. But
Absolutely.
we really felt like we had plenty of room to breathe and weren't being crushed by crowds even in the height of travel season in Idaho.
So the trip that I just did to Tokyo, where one of the things we did was drove in Tokyo traffic in go-karts, that's pretty much hell for him.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Good to know. Good to know. And if we wanted to send people to the best post on Idaho on jamiesays.com, where are we going to send them?
If you go to my website, there's one that's our Idaho road trip, 10 days in Idaho, our itinerary. It's a little bit more in-depth of what we spoke about here, and I can answer any questions there, and it'll link you to various other posts I've written about Idaho.
Excellent. Well, Jamie, thanks so much for coming on Amateur Traveler and sharing with us your newfound love for Idaho.
Thanks, Chris.
Good news is that the Amateur Traveler trip to Africa is happening. It's going to be a little smaller group so far than I was expecting. There's only 6 of us right now. There's room for you if you're interested. amateurtraveler.com/Africa 2019. And this is a trip for May of 2019. I hope you can join us. Of course, that also means we're trying to decide where to go in 2020. If you want to be part of that decision, join the Facebook group amateurtraveler.com/trips. A shout out to the Diary of a Slow Traveler blog, who wrote a little love letter in a blog post recently for Amateur Traveler and all the different places they have gone because of the show, and that always warms my heart. They mentioned Rome and Lazio and Wales and Israel and Jerusalem and a number of other places, and I'll put a link to that in the show notes. I'd like to ask you a favor. I'm in between contracts right now, and Amateur Traveler doesn't really pay the bills. So if you're booking travel anyway, and you appreciate the Amateur Traveler, if you could go to one of the links on Amateur Traveler under Book Travel or under Deals, it will cost you no more money to book through that link, but will make some money for Amateur Traveler and help support the show. You can also go to shortcuts like amateurtraveler.com/Expedia, amateurtraveler.com/hotels.com, and those will redirect you to an affiliate link that will also support the show. If you can do that, I appreciate it. Thanks. Speaking of the Amateur Traveler website, I am putting a lot more work into the blog these days because I don't have that contract work. And that does mean that there are articles, some surprising articles like the Amateur Traveler trip to Cambodia and Morocco, which I just got around to writing up. Thank goodness my wife writes a trip journal, which really is the basis for the Morocco article. Check those out at amateurtraveler.com. And with that, we're going to bring an end to this episode of Amateur Traveler. If you have any questions, send an email to host@amateurtraveler.com, or better yet, leave a comment on this episode at amateurtraveler.com. And thanks so much for listening.